So you guys just watched the video on Wayne Thiebaud's life and his work. So what we're going to do now is create our own versions inspired by his paintings. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at some examples here. You have 7 to choose from, and these are all paintings by Wayne Thiebaud. You guys can pick and choose from each of these examples. I don't want you copying anything exactly the way that you see it. So you want to create your own composition, so your own arrangement of elements in your space. So the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to take a piece of free draw paper, and I'm using a smaller piece of paper just so it'll fit on the screen for the example. You guys will use free draw paper, and you're going to choose some of the objects that you like, and then you're going to mix and match and create a composition. So for mine, I really like the ice cream cones. I could only fit 3 in mine, so I'm just drawing a really, really light sketch. Hopefully you guys can see this on the screen. I'm not getting highly detailed here because this is not my final drawing. This is my plan. This is what I'm going to do as far as placing all of my objects. And your requirements for this drawing is that you have overlapping and that 90% of this space is taken up. So we don't have objects just floating. So when we overlap objects, one is going to go over the other. Okay, so here's an example just with the cones. When I stop with the cones here, this table is overlapping over top of the cones. Okay, so I'm darkening up my lines so that you guys can see this a little bit better. But when I overlap objects, I want one in front of the other. So for example, I have my 2 cakes right here. And again, I don't have a lot of detail in it. On my final, I'll probably choose some of the frosting in here to put on, but I'm not going to do that now just because I just want to get a basic plan before I start my final. Okay, so I have 2 of the cakes overlapping. I have a sucker over here that's overlapping the cake and laying down. And then I have my 3 cupcakes over here that are going to overlap. Okay, the last thing that I want you guys to put in here is a table line. Some of these drawings, or excuse me, some of these paintings already have the table line in there. So this one right here, you can see the difference right here. This one doesn't have one, but it really makes a difference on the large scale that we're working on that you guys add the table line in there. And so here is the table that all of my sweets are sitting on. Okay, so this would be the back wall, this would be the table. Okay, once you finish this drawing right here, your plan, then you guys can get your final paper. Your final paper is going to be very large. Okay, so it's a 12 by 18. And this is the size here. You can see it's much, 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 much larger. Okay, so you'll get a very light pencil sketch because you can see the pencil through the oil pastel if you do use really, really dark lines. So you want to do it really light. This is where you're going to get all of your detail. So I drew out these lines right here with pencil before I started with the oil pastel. Okay, so the first thing that you're going to do again, you start with your composition using these, pick and choose, take 90% of the space on this page, overlap, and have a table line on there. That's the requirements. Then you're going to get a light pencil line on your final oil pastel paper that's 12 by 18 inches. And then I'm going to show you guys how to do the oil pastel here in just a minute. So one of our other vocab words is analogous colors. So when we're blending with the oil pastels, you want to use analogous colors, or colors that are next to each other on the color wheel. So if we look at our small color wheel right here, it even has a window for us for analogous colors. So if I know I want to use yellow-orange, here's some of the colors I can blend with it. Let me pull up on the screen. I can go all the way over here and it's going to blend pretty nicely. I can also go the opposite way if I want to use yellow-orange, and I can work with these colors over here. The farther apart you get on the color wheel, for instance, if I want to look at red and I'm blending it with green, those are complementary colors. When you mix them together, they're going to neutralize each other, or what I say is they make a brown poopy color. So you don't want to try to blend these together if you want them to look nice. Okay, so with the oil pastels, the requirement for that is that you have blended colors. So there's no solid colors filled in anywhere, and that you use analogous colors when you're blending. Another thing that you can do is use different values of one color. So if I want to use a light blue and a dark blue, or a pink and a red, those will blend really well together. Okay, so you're going to do a practice on this before you start on your final, so you get a little bit more comfortable with it. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit. So again, you'll be doing your practice oil pastel on your free draw paper that you put your composition on. Okay, now white gets taken over really easy, so I usually do that one first. So I'm going to look at the example here and see how he did it. Okay, so I have a highlight right here and then color along the outside. So I'm going to try that too. So I'm going to put my little highlight right here with my white oil pastel. And then I'm going to be blending pink and red together. So you can barely see the white oil pastel. I'm going to kind of draw a circle around it. That's where I put it right there. And what I'm doing is just putting light pressure because the oil pastels are different than crayons. They're a lot softer and they're oil-based, so it doesn't take a lot of pressure to do this. Okay, I'm not going to go over top the white because then that's going to disappear. Okay, now I know I want darker areas around my edges, so I'm going to start adding some of the red over the top, just along the edges. And I can kind of overlap the colors too when it's not white. And I can take my finger and I can blend this in a little bit. So I leave that little bit of a highlight right there. Okay, so on my final, I think I moved the highlight over a little bit, but I have the white highlight in the same area because if the light's coming from one area, you want to make sure it's consistent so it looks realistic. And you can choose different colors to do this method with. Again, I just use dark greens, light greens, and whites when I'm blending here. If you are blending, again, two complementary colors, I'm just going to show you what that'll look like. If I want to try to blend a red and a green, it's not going to look the greatest in between. So you guys see that color right there? Not great. It's not showing up on the screen as well, but it is kind of a brown poopy color. So again, don't blend complementary colors. Blend colors that are close to each other on the color wheel or colors of the same, the same color but different values. So light blue, light violet, dark violet. Okay. Okay, so the last step of your project is to put gel medium over the top of it to seal in the oil pastels. So once you have oil pastels covering your entire surface, and yes, I do want oil pastels over the entire surface, including the background, including the tabletop, then you're ready for the gel medium. Okay, the gel medium is an acrylic matte varnish, and it's kind of like, think about a clear nail polish. Okay, so it's going to go over the top of the surface, it's going to cover it, it's going to coat it and protect it, but it's not going to really show up afterwards. What it does is it keeps the oil pastels from smearing. Now, if this gets on your clothes, it's going to stain your clothes. It'll be clear, but it'll look like little pieces of plastic on there. So make sure that you guys are careful with this. You're going to be painting directly from the jar, and you're going to be using large paint brushes. I'm just going to do it on this small piece of paper so you guys can see it. Again, this will be on your final, okay? But I can't fit my final paper on the screen to do this. So what I'm going to do is I just take my large paintbrush and I put it on here. It kind of looks like Elmer's glue, and it dries clear like Elmer's glue too. So instead of painting upright where I have my paintbrush straight up, I'm going to go at an angle and I'm going to place the gel medium on there. And it's okay if you paint over the edges. You're going to have paper behind it, newspaper, free draw paper behind it, so that way it doesn't go all over the table. And what we want to avoid is the big clumps of it. So we want a smooth surface. So you see I still have my brush at an angle. The reason why I do that is I'm not trying to put a lot of pressure on the oils because I don't want them to smear. Okay, so if I go like this, my bristles are scratching the paper. If I go like this to the side, it's smoothing it out. So we just want to get rid of any of the little pieces that I see that are kind of clumped together. Those will show up when it dries. So I just want a nice thin coat. I can get more as needed from the jar. And I'm just smoothing it out. Once the whole surface is coated with the gel medium, you're going to very carefully pick it up by placing your hands underneath, and you're going to need both hands like this. You're going to put it on the drying rack. Okay, you can see the brush marks in there. They won't be as noticeable when it dries. And again, that keeps the oil pastels from smearing. So once it dries, I can run my hands over the top and it's not going to ruin the oil pastels. That is the last step in your drawing. Again, make sure your first, last name, and class period is on the back, ready to turn in.